After the genocide, humanity chose vengeance over diplomacy. Part 1. The silence after the fire. The sky above what was left of Colorado had turned a deep shade of brown. It was not the clean blue that people remembered. It was heavy and thick, the color of smoke and dust that had been sitting in the air for a long time. The mountains were still there, but they looked wrong somehow, like familiar things seen through dirty glass. It had been 30 days since the Caith came, and 30 days since they did the one thing that no one in any corner of the galaxy had ever believed any species would actually do. They had burned 11 cities from space. Not army bases, not weapons factories, not military ships or government bunkers, cities, places full of people who were walking to work, eating breakfast, picking up their children from school. The Caith had aimed their ships at those places and dropped kinetic rods from orbit, and when it was over, 11 cities were gone. Denver, Lagos, Seoul, Karachi, Buenos Aires, Nairobi, St. Petersburg, Jakarta, Melbourne, Cairo, and Montreal, where the Earth Council had been meeting that morning. 342 million people. Colonel Leonhardt stood at the edge of a cracked road on the outskirts of what had been Denver and looked out at the flat, dark wasteland ahead of him. He was a big man, wide in the shoulders, with a face that had seen a lot of years and a lot of hard weather. He had a habit of going very still when something was heavy on his mind. He was very still now. His boots were dusty. The wind moved slowly around him and smelled of old ash. Behind him, his aide Pete Garza stood, quietly holding a tablet he was no longer reading. Leon reached into the front pocket of his jacket and took out a photograph. It was a real photograph, printed on paper, the kind people kept because it felt more solid than a screen. In the picture, a woman was laughing at something that was happening off to the side, and a boy of about 10 was making a silly face. Leon looked at the photograph for a moment, then he folded it back up and put it in his pocket. His wife Claire, his son Danny. They had been visiting Claire's sister in Denver. Pete spoke carefully. "Sir, the council session starts in 6 hours. Admiral Yun wants you at the briefing before it." "I know," Leon said. "They want you to speak. You are the most senior ground officer who was present in the Denver zone. Your testimony—" "I know what my testimony is, Pete." Pete went quiet. Somewhere in the ruined ground ahead of them, something shifted and fell with a slow, tired crash. Leon turned and walked back to the transport without another word. The emergency session was being held in Zurich. Zurich had not been hit. The Caith had chosen their targets, carefully picking the places where human history and human memory were the thickest. The message had been easy enough to read. "We can reach you anywhere. Sit down and talk, or we will do more." The assembly hall was large and full of people who looked like they had not slept properly in a month. Ambassador Vila Akefer sat at the long, curved table near the center. She was a tall woman in her late 50s, with silver hair and the steady, careful manner of someone who had spent her whole life learning how to stay calm in rooms where other people were not. She had worked in interstellar diplomacy for more than 2 decades. She had built piece by piece the framework of communication between humanity, and a dozen alien species. She looked right now like a person who had been carrying something very heavy for a very long time. Across from her sat Fleet Admiral Sunny Yoon. Admiral Yoon was compact and precise. She folded her hands on the table and let silence sit before she spoke, the way a person does when they have learned that patience is a kind of strength. She had lost 400 people and 2 ships in the orbital engagement 30 days ago. She did not talk about it. She did not need to. The council chair, a tired-looking man named Jeffrey Crane, called the session to order. The Kaith have sent a second communication, he said. They are asking for formal ceasefire talks. As a gesture of good faith, they are offering to return one of the colony ships they captured in the outer system. Ambassador Akefer leaned forward. This is the moment we have been working toward. A ceasefire opens the door. If we respond now, before more people die. More people, said a voice from the back of the room. It was Leon. He had not planned to speak yet. The words had simply come out, quiet and flat, the way stones drop into still water. Everyone in the room turned to look at him. He walked to the front slowly, without hurrying, the way a man walks when he has nothing left to be nervous about. 342 million people are already dead, he said. They did not die in a battle. They were not soldiers. The Kaith did not hit our military ships first, or our orbital platforms, or our weapons programs. They waited. They found targeting solutions on 11 cities full of ordinary people, and they burned them. And now they want to talk. He looked at Ambassador Akefer. His voice did not go hard or loud. It stayed steady, which somehow made it land heavier than shouting. My wife and my son were in Denver. My wife's sister worked in a hospital 2 km from the center of the impact zone. I am not telling you this to ask for your sympathy. I am telling you so you understand that I am not speaking from a place of confusion about what happened. The Kaith made a choice. They made it on purpose. And now they are making a second choice, which is to find out if we are too broken and afraid to do anything except come to their table on whatever terms they set. He put both hands flat on the surface of the table and looked at the people in the room. I am not going to tell you what to decide. That is not my job here. But I will tell you what I know to be true. If we negotiate now, from the ruins of 11 cities with hundreds of millions of fresh dead behind us and no means to answer what was done, we will be negotiating on our knees. And the Kaith will know it. Every other species watching this will know it. And it will happen again, because nothing we agree to at the table will cost them anything they are not already willing to give. The room was so quiet that the air felt thick. Admiral Yun let 2 seconds pass. Then she looked at the council chair. I am moving to table the ceasefire. Response. I want 6 weeks to prepare a full military assessment before we decide anything. Jeffrey Crane looked slowly around the table. All those in favor. The hands went up one after another, until there were enough of them. Leon walked back to his seat and sat down. He did not look relieved. He did not look satisfied. He looked like a man who had said the thing that needed to be said and was now waiting with great patience for whatever came next. After the genocide, humanity chose vengeance over diplomacy. Part 2. What we build in the dark. Building warships fast required a specific kind of person. Not the smartest person. Not the most decorated or the most talked about. It required the kind of person who got up every morning and simply would not accept that something could not be done. That kind of stubbornness was rarer than brilliance and harder to replace. Chief Engineer Donna Rixey was that kind of person. She was 51 years old from Albuquerque, and she had spent 27 years building things in space. She had the hands of someone who still picked up her own tools when she felt like it, which was often because she did not fully trust other people's instincts about how metal behaved when it was being shaped in low gravity. She had run 3 separate construction stations over her career and had a reputation for delivering ahead of schedule, which was the only kind of reputation worth having in her line of work. She walked the full length of the main assembly bay at Lunar Shipyard Gamma 7 every morning at 5:30, coffee in one hand and a tablet in the other, and she spoke to every shift foreman in person, not over comms, not in writing, in person, face to face, because she believed that a person said things in a hallway that they would soften or cut out entirely in a report. Her deputy, Cal Ruiz, was a tall, lean engineer who had learned to walk fast just to keep up with her. Bay 4 is 3 days behind, he said, matching her stride. I know, she said. That is why I am going to Bay 4 first. They updated the rail assembly specs again last night. The forward mount geometry changed. I saw it. The new tolerances are tighter, but they are not impossible. Tell Yamamoto to redo his measurements before he touches the fabrication. All of them from scratch. He will not be happy about that. Nobody is happy right now, Cal. That is not a reason to put a crooked rail mount on a warship. The mandate that had come down from the Council 6 weeks after the bombardment was the kind of thing that most engineers would have quietly assumed was a political statement rather than a real order. Triple the fleet's combat capacity in 18 months. Not upgrade. Triple. Starting from a fleet that had already lost ships in the orbital engagement and was working with facilities that had been designed for peacetime production rates. Donna had looked at the mandate for about 10 minutes. Then she had gone to the council and told them she could do it in 16 months if they gave her access to the civilian construction workforce. They gave her the workforce. She was now at month 8. She was ahead of schedule. She told no one this because she did not want anyone slowing down. Meanwhile, far out in deep space at a research station that did not appear on any public registry of facilities, very different kind of work was being done. Dr. Nadia Forsyth did not look like a weapons designer. She was small and quiet and always seemed to have a strand of dark hair falling out of the bun she wore, no matter how many times she fixed it. She talked to herself when she was working through a problem, low and quick, the way some people hum. She had 2 doctorates, one in physics and one in material science, and she had spent the first 12 years of her career working on fusion reactor containment. She had been very good at it and had expected to spend the rest of her life doing it. Then she had watched a news broadcast 30 days after the bombardment, and she had sat in her apartment for a long time afterward, and then she had applied for a transfer to the weapons development Program. The program director had accepted her application in 4 minutes. She stood now in front of a whiteboard that covered most of one wall of her lab, covered in equations that she had been adding to and changing for 3 months. Her lab partner, a physicist named Owen Marsh, had learned to recognize the particular kind of quiet she got into when she was close to something. "You have an idea," he said. "I have a hypothesis. It is probably wrong. Your last 3 hypotheses were wrong for the first week and then turned out to be correct. This one might take longer to be wrong." She turned from the board. "The cath shields do not block incoming energy. They move it. They shun it sideways into a layer that sits just outside normal space. A very thin layer, like a second skin, between 2 states of existence." Owen was quiet for a moment. "And if that layer had a boundary, if it has a boundary, and if we can find the exact frequency that puts pressure on that boundary, then the layer collapses. And when it collapses, everything that was stored inside it comes back through. All at once." Owen set his stylus down very carefully on his desk. "You are describing a weapon that makes their shields turn against them. I am describing a hypothesis. If it is right, then yes, their shields become the most dangerous things on their own ships the moment they activate them." She turned back to the board. "I told you it was probably wrong. It took 4 more months to find out that it was not wrong." Nadia worked through the proof on a Tuesday, late in the evening when the station was quiet and most of the other researchers had gone to their quarters. She finished the last calculation and checked it 3 times. Then she sat down in her chair and looked at the wall for a long time. She understood exactly what she had done. She had built on paper something that could end a battle before the other side knew the battle had started. She had built it out of grief and out of the very specific kind of anger that does not burn hot but instead goes cold and very focused. She had built it because she had watched those 11 cities burn and had understood that doing nothing was not an option she could live with. She sat with it for a long time before she picked up her pen and wrote anything down. Back at Gamma 7, Donna Rixai stood on a gantry above Bay 4 and looked down at the frame of a warship that had not existed 8 months ago. It was nearly finished. The rail mounts were straight. The tolerances were correct. Cal stood beside her and did not say anything because he had learned that she sometimes just needed to look at what they were building. After a while, she finished her coffee, folded the cup, and put it in her pocket. "Bay 6 is going to need more hands on the second shift," she said. "Pull the crew from the maintenance rotation. The maintenance can wait." "Yes, Chief." She turned and walked back along the gantry, and below her, the warship sat in its cradle, growing stronger and more complete with every passing hour. After the genocide, humanity chose vengeance over diplomacy. Part 3: The fleet that grief built. The ship was the largest thing humanity had ever put into space that was built entirely for war. It was 900 m from front to back. It carried 4,000 people. It had 3 forward rail batteries, 16 missile launchers along its sides, and 16 of the new resonance weapons that had no official name yet, but that everyone on board called ghost killers because of what they did to the Caith shields and because no one had been able to think of a better word for it. Captain Rosa Navarro had been given command of it 4 months ago. She was 48 years old, from San Diego, and had spent most of her career on small, fast ships where you made decisions quickly and alone and did not have the luxury of waiting for someone with more authority to tell you what to do. She had never expected to command something this large. She was not sure anyone had expected her to, including the admiral who gave her the posting. But she had the job now, and she was going to do it the way she did everything, which was carefully and without fuss. She stood on the bridge of the UES Arden on the morning they were to depart and looked through the forward display at the stars. They did not look any different than they ever had, cold and far away and completely indifferent to what human beings were feeling or planning. Her first officer, Commander Dale Hutchins, came to stand beside her. Dale was a methodical man who kept detailed notes and never said anything without thinking it through first. These were qualities Rosa had specifically looked for when she chose her bridge crew. Admiral Yun's fleet has cleared the departure point, he said. We are ready to move on our signal. Good. Dale was quiet for a moment, then said, Captain, there is something I want to say before we go. Go ahead. The crew is ready. They are more than ready. But I have been watching them this past week, and I want to say, for the record, that I am a little worried about how much some of them want this. He kept his voice low and even. I'm not saying the feeling is wrong. I understand it. But when the wanting is too hot, people make the wrong choices at bad moments. I have seen it. Rosa looked at him for a moment. You are right to raise it. Put it in the ship's log. And then trust the training. Yes, Captain. She turned toward the shipwide channel and opened it. The soft click of the open line went out to every corridor, every station, every quarters room on the ship. This is the captain, she said. We have our orders and we have our heading. I want to say one thing before we move. We are not going out there as a mob. We are not going as people who have let their grief make the decisions for them. We are going as the finest thing our species has ever built, which is a military that knows the difference between justice and something worse. Those 11 cities deserve to be answered. But they deserve to be answered by people who are still in control of themselves. She paused. Do your jobs. Follow your training. Trust the person next to you. That is all. She closed the channel. Dale looked at her quietly. I know, she said before he could speak. I wanted to. I just cannot let that be the reason. The fleet moved through the jump point in formation, and the stars shifted, and they were on the other side of a very long distance, and the Keth home system lay ahead of them. The Keth home world was called Vel Kareth in their own language. It was a large planet, blue-green from a distance, with a wide ring of orbital platforms and a standing fleet of 31 capital ships. It had been defended this way for centuries against every threat that had ever come from any direction. The Keth were old as species went, and they had not lost a battle for their home system in 400 years. They had not in 400 years met anything like what was coming toward them now. On the Arden's bridge, the comms officer spoke up. Incoming signal from the Keth fleet. Captain, they are broadcasting on the diplomatic frequency. They are asking if we want to open a channel. Rosa did not hesitate. Log it. No response. Captain, their fleet is forming up. They are moving to intercept. Good. That means they are going to come to us, instead of making us go looking for them. Admiral Yun's voice came through on the command channel. All fleet captains, this is the Admiral. Final weapons check. We move in 12 minutes. Everyone holds formation until I give the word. Rosa looked at the tactical display. The Keth fleet was large. It was well positioned. The orbital platforms were layered and covered each other's angles. Any other day, against any opponent they had faced before, it would have been a very strong defensive setup. It was not going to be enough. She did not feel triumphant about that. She had thought before she came out here that she might feel something sharp and satisfying when the moment arrived. She did not. She felt heavy and clear and very focused, the way she always felt before. Something difficult that could not be undone. Dale was running through the final systems check beside her, his voice steady and professional, moving through each station in sequence, getting each confirmation, logging each reading. He was good at his job. Everyone on this bridge was good at their job. Rosa had made sure of it because she had known from the moment she was given command that whoever she put on this ship was going to carry the weight of what they were about to do for the rest of their lives. She wanted them to be able to carry it. All stations ready, Captain, Dale said. Thank you, Commander. Admiral Yun's voice came through again. All ships, weapons free on my mark. 3, 2, 1, mark. And the fleet moved forward, and the waiting was over, and what came next was the thing that humanity had been building toward for 14 long and terrible months. After the genocide, humanity chose vengeance over diplomacy. Part 4: Ghost Killers. The first wave of fire crossed 80,000 km. In a handful of seconds, the human fleet broke into 3 groups. The left and right sides swung out wide, drawing the Keth capital ships toward them. The center group drove straight toward the orbital platforms with the Ghost Killers at the front, ready to fire. The Keth shields came on instantly, the way they always did. Their crews had run this drill hundreds of times. The moment an enemy fired, the shields activated, the incoming energy was absorbed and moved sideways into the thin dimensional layer between normal space and something else, and the ship stayed whole. It had worked against every weapon anyone had ever pointed at them. For 4 seconds, the Keth captains believed this engagement was going the same way all the others had. Then the resonance weapons found the boundary frequency. On the bridge of the Ardent, Rosa Navarre watched the tactical display and felt something go cold inside her chest. The Keth flagship's shields did not shut down. They did not fail in any ordinary way. They turned inside out. Everything that had been moved into the dimensional layer in the past 4 seconds came back through all at once from inside the ship's own defensive field, with nowhere to go but through the structure around it. The flagship came apart in a way that had no good word for it. It was not quite an explosion. It was more like everything that held the ship together simply stopped at the same moment. Keth fleet is breaking formation, said Dale, his voice steady and professional, even as the display filled with new readings. The flanks are turning. Some ships are running. Some are, he stopped. Some are what? Rosa said. Some are raising Whitefield, Captain. Whitefield was the Keth distress signal. It meant the same thing in every language that had ever used it. We are done. We are not fighting anymore. Rosa looked at the display for 3 full seconds. Mark every vessel showing Whitefield and pull them out of the targeting. Solution. Captain, the Admiral's orders were to press the engagement until. I know what the orders say, Commander. Pull the Whitefield vessels from the solution and log my decision with a timestamp. If Admiral Yun overrules me, she overrules me. Dale looked at her for one moment. Then he turned back to his station, pulling Whitefield vessels from targeting, logging at 8:47 ship time. The battle continued around them. 3 of the 7 orbital platforms were destroyed when their own shields inverted on them. 2 were disabled and boarded. 2 raised Whitefield before the resonance weapons came within range, and Rosa made the same call for those as she had made for the fleet ships. The boarding actions were different from the space battle. In space, it was all readings on a display, shapes moving on a screen, numbers changing. In a boarding action, it was a corridor, and people at the other end of it. Lieutenant Carla Dean had been a Marine for 11 years. She had done 3 boarding operations before this one, and she had thought she knew what to expect. She had expected the same cold, precise professionalism that the Keth had shown when they chose their 11 targets and dropped their rods. She had expected a species that looked at other lives as pieces on a board. The corridor of Platform 4 was lit in. The orange emergency lighting the Keth used, and when Carla's team moved through the hatch, the Keth crew backed away from them against the walls. They were not raising weapons. They were not trying to fight. Most of them were small, and their movements were fast and panicked, the movements of people who were very frightened. A lot of them looked young. Carla held up her fist, and her team stopped moving. She stood there for a moment, looking at the Keth crew pressed against the wall. And she thought about Lagos. She thought about the hospital in Seoul that had been in the direct impact zone. She thought about what her sister had said on the phone the morning after the bombardment, when her sister had been trying to find out if her friends were still alive. Then she thought about the choice that was sitting in front of her right now, in this corridor on this platform, while no one senior to her was watching. And the decision was entirely hers to make. Stand down, she said in standard, and then in the 4 words of Keth she had been taught by the linguists before. Departure. Hands where we can see them. We are not killing prisoners. Her sergeant, a man named Walt Greer, came up beside her. Walt had lost both his parents in the Lagos strike. Carla had known this when she asked him to be on her team. She had asked him anyway because he was the best she had, and because she trusted him in the way you only trust people you have worked beside in difficult places. Walt looked at the young Keth crew against the wall. Then he lowered his weapon. Move them to the forward hold, he said. To the team, his voice as steady as if he were running a routine drill. Hands visible. Everyone goes home breathing. Later, much later, when the platform was secured and the team was waiting for extraction, Carla sat against a wall in the forward hold with her helmet off and looked at the deck for a long time. Walt sat down beside her. You all right? He said. She thought about it honestly. I think so. You? He was quiet for a moment. Yeah, he said. I think I am. She nodded slowly. The Keth prisoners were on the other side of the hold, sitting in a group, quiet and watching them. They did not look like the species that had glassed 11 cities. They looked like people who were very tired and very scared and waiting to find out what was going to happen to them. Carla looked at them and understood something she had not fully understood before they boarded. The species that had made the choice was not the same as every single person who belonged to that species. That did not make what had been done acceptable. It did not change what had been lost, but it changed what she was going to do. With her rifle in a room full of frightened young people who had not been the ones to give the order, the hardest part of the whole operation, she wrote in her report afterward, was not the fighting. The hardest part was the moment in the corridor when she could have chosen otherwise, and she chose not to, and she had to live with knowing that the choice had been entirely hers to make. After the genocide, humanity chose vengeance over diplomacy. Part 5: The Weight of What We Chose. The Keth sent their most senior diplomat to the Arden on the third day. She came under the White Field Protocol, which both sides had agreed to honor. Her name translated roughly as Velsara, and she was old in the way the Keth measured age, which meant she had been alive when humans and Keth made first contact 40 years ago. She had seen the long arc of the relationship between the two species from the very beginning. She was brought to the ship's conference room. Someone on the crew had set it up with 2 chairs on opposite sides of a plane table, no weapons visible, no tactical displays running. Rosa walked in and saw it and felt a small, quiet gratitude toward whoever had done that. She never found out who it was. Velsara sat across from her. The translation unit between them hummed. You did not destroy our world, Velsara said. No, Rosa said. Our people have reviewed the weapon data. 4 or 5 well-placed resonance strikes at the right geological points would have been enough to. I know what they would have been enough for, Rosa said. A long silence sat between them. The translator handled it. Why? Said Velsara. Rosa had thought about this question for months, starting before the fleet ever left human space. She still was not sure her answer was complete, but she gave the one she had. Because we decided what we were before we left, she said. We looked at what was in front of us, and we decided what we were willing to do and what we were not. Burning a world was not on the list, even after what was done to yours. Especially after that. If we had done it to you because of what was done to us, we would have become exactly the kind of thing we crossed all this space to stop. There would have been nothing left of us worth keeping. Velsara was quiet for a long time. When she spoke again, there was something in her translated voice that Rosa thought might have been grief or something close to it. The decision to strike your cities was not made by our whole government, she said. There was a faction. There were those of us who argued against it loudly in every session we were permitted to speak in. We were overruled. By the time we understood what was about to happen, it was already done. I know, said Rosa. We had that information before we came. It was part of what we considered. And yet you still came. Yes, because what was done had to be answered. There is no version of the galaxy in which 342 million dead people are simply accepted as the cost of doing business. But what we did here and how we did it, that was always going to be our choice to make, not yours. Velsera looked at her across the table for a moment. Then she said, "What happens now?" "Now," said Rosa, "we talk." Admiral Yun conducted the terms discussion herself, which was the right call. Yun was precise and fair and had no interest in punishment for its own sake. She brought Ambassador Akefer into the process on the second day, and if anyone read that as a sign of softening, they were wrong. It was a sign that Yun knew when the military part of something was finished, and the next part needed to begin. The terms were not easy for the Keth. They were not designed to be easy, but they were designed to be survivable, which was a different thing. The Keth would hand over their 11 largest warships. A wide buffer zone would be established around human space. The faction members who had ordered the bombardment would stand before an international tribunal. Reparations would be negotiated over years under joint supervision, and there would be no rushing the process and no shortcuts. It was the kind of settlement that came out of the knowledge that the alternative was something neither side could live with. Ambassador Akefer signed the preliminary accord and then sat quietly for a moment before she spoke. "I did not agree with the decision not to negotiate at the beginning. I want that on the record." "It is on the record," said Yun. "I still believe in general that diplomacy should come first. Also on the record." Akefer looked at her. "You were right about what would have happened if we had come to the table from a position of ruin. I have spent the last 18 months thinking about it, and I believe you were right." Yun sat down her pen and looked out the viewport at the Keth homeworld. It was still there, still turning, still full of hundreds of millions of people who had woken up 3 days ago, not knowing if they would still have a world by the time they went to sleep. Again, being right about something like this, Yun said quietly, does not feel the way you expected it to. A year later, they built memorials. They built them in all 11 cities, or in the places where those cities had been, because some of the ground was still being cleared and would not be ready to build on for years yet. The memorials were simple. The names were read out loud. Colonel Leon Hart attended the one in Denver on a cold morning in October. He stood in the middle of a large crowd and listened. The names took a long time to read. He heard Claire's name. He heard Danny's name. He stood very still and looked at the sky, which was pale and clear and nothing like the brown haze that had hung over it for so long. Afterward, a young reporter found him at the edge of the crowd. She was maybe 25, young enough that the world before the bombardment was something she knew mostly from other people's stories. "Colonel," she said, "can I ask you something for the broadcast?" "Go ahead," he said. "What do you want people to understand about what happened out there? About the choice that was made?" He thought about it for a moment, the way he thought about everything, slowly and without rushing. "We went," he said. "We did what we went to do. We came back. And we did not become the thing we went to stop. That is the whole of it, as far as I am concerned." He paused. "It would have been easy to burn them the way they burned us. I know exactly how easy it'd have been. I know exactly how it would have felt in the moment, but we did not. And the reason we did not is that somewhere inside all the anger and the grief, there was still enough of us left to remember what we were, what we wanted to be. He looked out at the wide, flat space where the city used to be. That is what I want people to remember. Not the weapons, not the battle. That. The reporter thanked him, and he nodded, and put his hands in his pockets and walked slowly back toward the transport. The sky above him was clean and cold and full of light, and the ash was gone, and the earth below his feet was still the way the earth eventually gets still again after everything it has been through, because it has no other choice. And perhaps neither did they.